Hello there. Welcome in. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on Extra Sports 1300, 740 KVOR, or you're listening on the streaming apps of those two fine radio stations where you can find wherever fine digital streaming apps are given away because they are free to download and free to use. And they're sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics coming your way over the course of the program, and I would love to get your thoughts at, 719-247-1313. You will hear from Sean Payton. I think incredibly telling audio from Sean Payton regarding the Jonathan Cooper situation that I want to get into. And Vegas at it again when it comes to replacing coaches. But I do want to start, and this is where everyone has started today, but I think it's the natural place to begin, and that is with the latest chapter in the Brendan Sorsby saga, which apparently is now coming to an end, at least the college football part of this saga, as Brendan Sorsby has stated his intention to enter the NFL's supplemental draft. Now, there's a little bit of a trick to the supplemental draft that I'll get into later, but the big part of this is that Brendan Sorsby will not play at Texas Tech this fall. And I am surprised by this news, because I just said on yesterday's show that I thought Brendan Sorsby would be playing at Texas Tech this fall. Texas Tech had gone through all of this stuff. Brendan Sorsby had gone through all of it to make sure he was on the field, despite everyone's pleadings that you cannot let this happen, despite the fact that Texas Tech had to know that they were on the wrong side of history when it came to this. But they trudged ahead anyway and bent over backwards and went out of their way to try and justify the unjustifiable. There's no reason that I can find that says that Brendan Sorsby should have to play college football this fall. And I believe Texas Tech, because of Brendan Sorsby's immense talent, was willing to go through all of this, drag their own name through the mud, sound completely ridiculous in defending their decision. And they wouldn't have done it if they didn't think they had a legitimate shot of winning a national championship with Brendan Sorsby. But now that's all gone because Brendan Sorsby is leaving. And as this thing is pieced together, apparently what the death blow was to all of this is a lawsuit that was filed by the Big 12. Not against Brendan Sorsby's injunction that he got, but it was the attorney general in Texas basically threatening the Big 12 if they were to try to sanction Texas Tech, because that's where the conference was going. Okay, the NCAA got, lost in court, or got, Brendan Sorsby got the temporary injunction. So he was going to play. So the Big 12 was toying with the idea of saying, okay, Brendan Sorsby can play, but we're going to punish Texas Tech for doing this. And the Texas Attorney General said, you better not. You can't do that. And the Big 12 said, yes, we can, and sued in order to be allowed to, and even the First Amendment is brought into all of this, but basically saying, yes, we can Texas Tech is a member institution of our conference. It is within our right, and it's not an antitrust violation for us to sanction one of our member schools. And apparently this turned up the heat enough, I think, and we'll know more in the coming days, I'm sure. But what I think is this forced Texas Tech's hand to go to Brendan Sorsby and say, you know what? We tried, but this is something that we can't fight back against. If the Big 12 is going to come down on us for you playing, it's probably best that you go. That's my working theory. I'm sure a college football insider has maybe even reported on this already, and I may have missed it, but to me, that's what this kind of smacks of, is that Texas Tech is like, we can't fight the Big 12, and if they sanction us, then what is this all for? We can't do this. So Brendan Sorsby is now moving on to the NFL supplemental draft. And there is despite what Cody Campbell will try to convince you of on social media, Texas Tech did not suddenly come to their senses. They did not have an Ebenezer Scrooge-like epiphany being visited by ghosts overnight. The Big 12 used the same weapon that Brendan Sorsby used against the NCAA, which is the courts. And like the NCAA was found, at least temporarily, in court. I know they're appealing. They filed an appeal yesterday, but basically the injunction was, yeah, I don't think you have the power to do this, NCAA. Well, the Big 12 filed a lawsuit that Texas Tech has looked at and like, I don't know that we can fight this. I don't know that we have the power to be able to push back against any sanction that the Big 12 is going to take against us. So this is not, Texas Tech deserves zero credit in all of this. They had every intention of bucking a trend that has gone on for the entire time sports has been going on, which is if you bet on your sport, you cannot play anymore. And Texas Tech saw that and said, well, that doesn't really apply to us. Brendan Sorsby said that doesn't apply to me. So there is no credit to be given out here. But this is going to end, for college football anyway, the right way, which is Texas Tech will enter the season with Will Hammond as their quarterback. There will be no sanctions. They withdrew their the challenge of the NCAA, so Brendan Sorsby is officially ineligible, and college football will be able to move on. Now, there will still be some of the lingering effects. Texas Tech is not going to be a popular team that will come through your city, including Boulder, coming up this fall. Okay, they have done permanent damage to their brand. And they are, the Vegas Golden Knights are in the news. I think Texas Tech is going to be viewed in much the same way. A team that was, or a school that was willing to go to extraordinary lengths that we didn't think anyone would go to try and win. To roster and to play a quarterback who bet on college athletics, including games that his own team played in. And he bet against them, by the way. Let's not forget that part of the story. But this, I don't want to say it's a satisfying end, but it is the right end. Brendan Sorsby could not play football this fall. In the Big 12 and the NCAA did everything they could, and they finally found the right mixture of lawsuits and appeals to be able to get this result. Now, couple of things moving forward. One is from the college sports landscape. This cannot continue. We can't have things in college athletics continuing to be fought over in a courtroom. That is dysfunctional. With all these athletes going to courts, their local courthouse around the corner from their house, and getting a friendly judge to grant them an injunction against the NCAA. And I don't doubt the legal grounds. I think the NCAA is a huge problem in that they have overreached in their power. But we can't keep going this way in college athletics. We can't have everything decided in a courtroom. And this is where the bill that is going through Congress right now, apparently it's going to be amended on Thursday. Something has to come of this. And the NCAA has to be given the power with, I think, collective bargaining. But there has to be an entity that can punish and levy punishments towards its member institutions, teams, and players. That has to be allowed, just like in the NFL, NBA, any of the professional sports. The question just ultimately becomes, are the Big Ten and the SEC a part of that? Or are they going to do their own thing? And are they going to be judge, jury, and executioner when it comes to anything that happens in there? And they don't want to say Super League because it's a bad word and everybody freaks out about it, but that's what it is. Separating from the rest of college athletics to govern themselves. And then where does that leave the rest of college sports? That's a question for sure. But something from, and I'm not the biggest fan of, Congress fixing things. I don't think they have a tremendous track record in that, but something has to be done at a higher level here. Because this can't continue. We can't have court case after court case, injunction after appeal to decide everything that goes on. And that's what, in part, as flawed as the bill is, that's what it's trying in large part to remedy. And it's trying to tether the SEC and the Big Ten to the rest of college athletics. So we can't continue to battle everything in college sports out in the courtroom. That can't happen. The second thing is what happens with Brendan Sorsby. Okay, the NFL has to approve his application, if you will, into the supplemental draft. Now, he meets the criteria, not to sound like Isaiah Thomas on The Last Dance, but he meets the criteria. He missed the draft, and he is ineligible to play college football. So he meets the requirements. But we know that the NFL, with its antitrust exemption and its CBA, has a lot of power here. And they can evaluate the Brendan Sorsby situation and say, we will allow you to join our fraternity or we won't. And I got to say, a lot of the Brendan Sorsby story, I got to imagine, worries the NFL a little bit. Is it worth it? They don't do a supplemental draft the whole time. Not everybody becomes eligible for it. The NFL can say no. And we'll see if they do. And then if he is available, who takes him? From what, and I saw Brendan Sorsby play the Cincinnati-Nebraska game, and he looks talented. But is he enough to give up your first-round pick? I'll throw out a team, the Arizona Cardinals, for instance, right? They don't really have a quarterback right now. They're arguing over a contract with Jacoby Brissett. The Arizona Cardinals are probably not going to be a very good football team this year. their first round pick next year could be very high. This is the one in the hand is worth two in the bush. Or at least that's what a team like the Arizona Cardinals or any other NFL team has to weigh here. If Brendan Sorsby is a first-round talent, and a lot of talent evaluators think that he is, okay, is he still better than what this crop of quarterback is going to be, including, we think, finally, Arch Manning? So are you willing to take Brendan Sorsby now because then you forfeit your opportunity to draft in the first round next year? Not just, but the question for these teams is not just who Brendan Sorsby is as a quarterback, right? It's not that simple. And this is what Texas Tech, willfully ignored. Brendan Sorsby's talent is actually so far beyond the point. It's what Brendan Sorsby was, what he admitted to, what the doctors that the psychologists that interviewed him are saying, like he has a gambling addiction. You remember Art Schlichter, right? How problematic is it for the NFL in totality or an individual NFL team to say this guy is essentially worth a first-round pick when he is dealing with all of this? And the optics, too, of bringing in somebody with this checkered past into your organization. And are we sure it's not going to happen again with Brendan Sorsby, this time at the NFL level? We've seen the way they've come down on a Broncos player recently within the last couple years, right? When it comes to betting. It is not a done deal that just because Brendan Sorsby and that Texas Tech college football side of the story is come to a conclusion that Brendan Sorsby's football career is going to continue. But that's moving forward. Again, right now, the important thing is Brendan Sorsby is ineligible, dropped his challenge. He will not play for Texas Tech this fall. That's the big news of the day. Where the Brendan Sorsby story goes from here, I'm sure in a slow time of year, that is the summer in sports, Brendan Sorsby is going to be a very popular subject, and this show is going to be no different. But for now, I take your thoughts, 719-247-1313. Brendan Sorsby will not be playing for Texas Tech or any college football team this fall. Just getting going. More Drive Time Sports after this. You'll hear from Sean Payton here momentarily as he spoke to the media today at a mandatory minicamp. Not mandatory for everyone, not when you're going through what Jonathan Cooper's going through. That is momentarily, but I would like to get to this text from Albert regarding today's news that, or it was actually late yesterday's news, but everyone reacting to it today. Texas Tech quarterback Brendan Sorsby is leaving Texas Tech, dropping his challenge of his eligibility, and trying to get into the NFL supplemental draft. And this is certainly going to follow him. If he does have an NFL career, it's going to be talked about, but I wonder what the impact to Texas Tech is. And I think that they have done damage to their brand. And how long that damage lasts is, a question. I know we can't. Well, let me get to Albert's text. He says, Texas Tech will be forgiven by most people in institutions. It will just be like if you had a crazy Vegas wedding and it was swept under the rug. I like that metaphor, but I think it's going to take a while. Texas Tech is going to be booed everywhere they go. And it may not just be their football team, by the way. I think, what was it? Michigan canceled the volleyball game against Texas Tech. Now, I don't know if schools are going to continue to cancel any of their games against Texas Tech, but if Texas Tech comes calling, at least for this upcoming season of college athletics, you have to think that Texas Tech is going to get dragged and criticized and booed. Does it stay on there forever? Does that damage last forever? No, nothing lasts forever. And I know our attention spans are not what they used to be. You can't tell me that people won't keep their outrage up for at least a year. But I also understand this. Glass houses. There are a lot of other institutions besides Texas Tech that would have done this. That, to be fair, but that doesn't mean that what Texas Tech did was even remotely okay. And it doesn't mean that they don't deserve a ton of criticism. But I think maybe that's part of what Albert is getting to with his text. Right? The forgiveness comes with understanding. Who hasn't had a crazy Vegas wedding? Let's just say crazy Vegas weekend. I think that's more relatable. Not all of us go to the chapel and get married. But it's understanding. Right? Your friend, your brother, your sister, your parents, we have all had one of those. So perhaps that's where some of the heat on Texas Tech dissipates, is that deep down some of these institutions realize that if they had the chance to get Brendan Sorsby, Cincinnati, they would have and did, despite all of this going on. But I don't want to say that to say it's okay what Texas Tech did. We should keep up our outrage for as long as we can muster it. I want to play you some audio from Sean Payton today regarding Jonathan Cooper. And I won't say anything before. I want you to hear it, and maybe you're hearing this for the first time, and I want you to see what you think Sean Payton is getting at, or what the conclusion of the Jonathan Cooper story will be. Here is Sean Payton earlier this afternoon.
He's taking this time. Obviously, he's got to work on himself, and the club is very much in tune to the league office, local authorities here, and we've had several meetings. Clearly, from an ownership standpoint, head coach, organizationally, there's a bar that we have and an expectation that we have that's very high.
The last part. Marinate on that. We have a very high bar. Sean Payton before Jonathan Cooper's second arrest. Just talking about the first arrest was not bragging, I don't think, but just being very proud of the fact that the Denver Broncos under Sean Payton have stayed out of trouble. He's very proud of that, as he should be. Then Jonathan Cooper got arrested again. And now Jonathan Cooper's story is morphing into more what his girlfriend's accounts of the events were. And the pause that Sean Payton and I suffer from the same affliction, and that is pregnant pauses. We are both very much, we both love ourselves some pregnant pauses. But as somebody who dabbles in that, I can tell you that pregnant pauses are for questioning. Do I go where I want to go here? What is the next thing I want to say? And after that pause from Sean Payton, I heard, not in those words, Jonathan Cooper's not going to be a part of this football team. How could you interpret what Sean Payton said as anything other than what you and I discussed? If Jonathan Cooper did everything that his girlfriend alleged, which it's getting closer to that every time Jonathan Cooper is arrested, the idea that he grabbed her by her neck and lifted her up, this is beyond the pale. And for an organization that, since Greg Penner took over, has done all the right things, right? Something as trivial and silly as replacing the turf, right? Building the new scoreboard. Now they're going to have a new stadium that they're going to finance by themselves. They give Pat Surtain a raise. They rip up Sean Payton's contract. The Denver Broncos under Greg Penner want to be a model organization. But that's a model so that players in the NFL want to play for them, but it's also a model in the community that they reside in. They want you to have a high opinion of their organization. And if Jonathan Cooper is found to be guilty of what he is being accused of, keeping him on the roster flies in the face of all of that. And Sean Payton is not, he cut Russell Wilson just because he wasn't that good of a quarterback and incurred the biggest dead cap number in the history of the NFL. Okay, he walked in and 2 seconds later, he cut Justin Simmons, one of the most beloved Denver Broncos players at the time. You telling me that Sean Payton is going to look at what Jonathan Cooper is accused of doing, and obviously he's going to let the legal process play out like we all are. But if we come out on the other end of this and Jonathan Cooper did what his girlfriend alleged that he did, Jonathan Cooper's not going to be on the Denver Broncos. Because how can you talk about your standard being as high as Sean Payton just said and keep somebody that did that to another human being? You can't keep him and espouse and brag and be proud of being a model organization. You can't. Now, Sean Payton, I don't know what the rules are. And look, we all want legal process to play out. Okay? And the Broncos want it to as well. Do the Broncos know more than you and I do? Probably. But do they know everything? Do they know for a fact? Can they know for a fact what happened that night? So they are smart to let the legal process play out. But what I heard from Sean Payton there is if this keeps going the way it's going, and he gets charged with these things, the Denver Broncos are going to take the first off-ramp and cut him. That's what I'm hearing. And they have to do it. And if you're going to say that you're this model organization, this beacon on the hill, as it were, in the National Football League, then you cannot let this be okay by welcoming Jonathan Cooper back like nothing happened. And if you want to get into the cold, hard business of it all, you have a more than capable guy behind Jonathan Cooper on the roster in Jonah Ellis. And I don't even need to go that far because Sean Payton came in, the way his tenure in Denver started. There were a lot of cuts made without knowing for sure. He cut Russell Wilson without knowing for sure whether he was going to secure his quarterback. He just knew at the time, that's not my QB. And please don't misunderstand me. I'm not lumping in Russell Wilson and Jonathan Cooper. But what I am saying is that Sean Payton has a standard for the caliber of football player, the type of football player, but also the type of person that he wants in his organization. And somebody that did what Jonathan Cooper is alleged to have done does not sync up with that. I think that is Sean Payton saying, and I don't know how much he knows, but I think that is Sean Payton intimating that if Jonathan Cooper is charged with these things, right, because of his status, he may not get hard jail time or whatever. I don't know about all of that in the legal side of it. You know better on the text line. I've had some great texts with great insight into matters like this. But what I am talking about is, regardless of how that goes, I'll put it this way. There's not going to be a video posted today about Jonathan Cooper getting out of jail and going straight to the Denver Broncos facility like there was with Rashee Rice today. I don't think so. I think Jonathan Cooper, if I know legal due process fans, please listen to me when I say, if he is found to have done what his girlfriend alleged that he did, he is not going to be a Denver Bronco anymore. I think that is an incredibly telling statement from Sean Payton, reiterating the high standard that he has, a standard that is higher than a division rival. If we're being honest about it, takes that very seriously. And you should want a coach that has that high of a standard. And I've heard from many Broncos fans since all of this happened saying we don't want him on the team. I think Sean Payton is of like mind with you. There's a way to go about this. There's a process. There's the legal side of it, which is far more important than the football side. The Broncos will let that play out. But if Jonathan Cooper does not come out of on the other end of this clean, I think his days in Denver are over. Jonathan Cooper excused from mandatory minicamp to, in Sean Payton's words, work on himself and work on the situation he has found himself in. 719-247-1313. Back after this. Your reaction to Sean Payton's comments today from mandatory minicamp regarding Jonathan Cooper. I think when you talk about how high of a standard you have for your organization and the players within it, and you have a situation like Jonathan Cooper, I think those two things are incongruent. I think they fly in the face of one another, and I think that Jonathan Cooper will not be a Denver Bronco at some point here as all of this plays out. Chris disagrees on the text line. Says, I don't see him getting released. It's a he said, she said situation unless there is heavy evidence to the contrary. A doctor said that Jonathan Cooper's girlfriend suffered injuries consistent with strangulation. So I don't know if that meets your... I'm saying there is evidence. That's why things have gotten worse for Jonathan Cooper, because it started as he said, she said, and now it's he said, she said, and a doctor says. So I legitimately don't know if that's, and you probably know better than I do. I'm just putting it in there that a doctor did say that the injuries she sustained were consistent with strangulation. So it's not totally he said, she said. The team always sides with the player. That's what's best for business. Adds nothing in that soundbite from the coach said to me that Cooper won't be back on the team. I heard he won't be at OTAs and maybe sometime at training camp. I did not hear that he was going to no longer be a Bronco. We didn't say it. But well, if you're just tuning in, let me play it again and see if your takeaway is what mine is, that Sean Payton is not going to have this guy back on his team once all of the legal process plays out, or you agree with Chris that you don't pick up on that at all. Here's Sean Payton again from earlier this afternoon.
He's taking this time. Obviously, he's got to work on himself, and the club is very much in tune to the league office, local authorities here, and we've had several meetings. Clearly, from an ownership standpoint, head coach, organizationally, there's a bar that we have and an expectation that we have that's very high.
I'll let you decide. But how can you talk about how high your standard is and allow Jonathan Cooper back on the team? And it's not just the situation that he's found himself in is a black eye on the Broncos organization. I mean, we don't even have to get to all the way there where he did everything that she alleged. Just the fact that he was caught up in it. The Broncos have had none of this going on under Sean Payton. Just the situation is embarrassing to the Denver Broncos. It's not their fault. But I guess I would turn it around and just say, okay, so what is it that Jonathan Cooper, because I agree with you that most teams, let's throw out Kansas City, for instance. Kansas City is a team that has decided on multiple occasions that they don't need to take a hardline stance in every domestic violence situation that one of their players gets into, or any serious legal situations that their players find themselves in. They don't feel like they have to draw that line. And if the player, whether it's Tyreek Hill, whether it's, Rashee Rice, if they can help them win football games, they bring him back. But but the Chiefs, I don't know, have talked a lot about the high standard they have for the conduct on the team. I'm sure they have at some point, but I don't hear a lot of it, and I don't know that they should be saying any of that over the last few years. But what would be, I'm saying that the result where this is going to lead to Jonathan Cooper not being on the Denver Broncos. Where is the pivot here that Jonathan Cooper can come back? Completely exonerated? Because, this is not a courtroom. Okay, burden of proof and all that kind of stuff. The reports that are out there, the affidavits that are out there, the fact that Jonathan Cooper has already added more to his story that resembles more what his girlfriend said when it comes to the accounting of the events. Like, we are moving in a direction where her account of the events is the truth. Jonathan Cooper admitted to grabbing her by her neck, something that he did not bring up when he was arrested the first time. He also violated a protection order by knocking on her door and texting her repeatedly. Like, I think the question is, at this point, how does Jonathan Cooper play for the Denver Broncos? Not how do the Broncos, kick Jonathan Cooper off the team. I think that dynamic is flipped. Now, from my perspective, I have to be convinced on why Jonathan Cooper is going to be a member of the Denver Broncos, because I agreed with what Chris is saying when Jonathan Cooper was arrested the first time. And then he was arrested a second time, and more charges were added. And his accounting of the events of that night changed, or he added more to it. Yeah, I mean, 24 hours ago, I thought that Brendan Sorsby was going to be playing for Texas Tech this fall. So I'm not sitting here saying that I'm right all the time. Probably, I may not be hitting above the Mendoza line, but I just give you my feelings on this, my reaction to it, and my reaction to what Sean Payton said is that you can't have the standard that they have, which is very high, and welcome Jonathan Cooper back onto the football team. Not the way it's going. We'll see. Shifting gears. The Avalanche have made their first move of the offseason, and guess which team they've decided to trade with? You'll be shocked to find out that it's Nashville that the Avalanche are dealing with today. The first order of business for Joe Sakic as GM once again of the Colorado Avalanche, and Chris McFarland as the Joe Sakic of the Nashville Predators organization, were to call up one another and to make a bit of a trade. And this is according to the team's release, Avalanche have acquired goaltender Magnus Krona. That name should ring a bell. In a positive way if you're a Pioneers fan, in a negative way if you are a Tigers fan. But they get Magnus Krona, a third-round draft pick in this draft, and a third-round pick in next draft for Ross Colton. And a goaltender in Isaac Posh that, no, with all due respect, we haven't ever heard of. Ross Colton is leaving the Colorado Avalanche and going to the Nashville Predators. And the Avs are getting essentially the goaltender swap is even Steven Krona, I think, signed with a team in Europe or something like that. It's essentially Ross Colton for 2 mid-round picks. And I think, now, I'm not going to make this out to be a blockbuster by any stretch of the imagination, because it is not. However, the one person that you would think would know Joe Sakic's reputation better than anyone is Chris McFarland. And yet I look at this trade and I say, this is a good bit of business done by Joe Sakic. I don't quite know what Nashville's angle is on this. And I know Ross Colton, popped up at the beginning of the playoffs. But for the most part, Ross Colton has not been what the Avalanche were hoping he would be. And he makes a decent amount of money. So this to me is, yes, the Avs open up a spot in their bottom six that they're going to have to figure out. But they get cap relief and they get draft capital back for a player that was not producing a lot for them. So, again, I'm not in Nashville, so I don't know what Chris McFarland is angling for with this, but from the Avalanche perspective, I think it's a good move. Cap space, draft capital. Not expecting you to faint and marvel at Joe Sakic's wizardry. I'm just saying this looks like a really good trade from the Avs side. Coming up next, Brendan Sorsby not playing college football after all this fall. The latest coming up next on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300.